And my next guest hasn't officially thrown her hat in the 2012 presidential race yet, but with several recent trips to early primary states, she certainly appears to be leaning in that direction, and a final decision could be mere months away. In the meantime, she's staying busy in Washington, fighting to keep the government from shutting down in just 8 days. And I sat down earlier with Minnesota Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann to get her reaction to the countdown to the shutdown, plus more on her possible presidential plans. Let's take a look. Congresswoman, welcome back. Good to see you.
Sean, good to see you again, too. Thank you.
All right, so this is getting serious. You're contemplating a run for the presidency. Apparently you had some good reaction when you were in Iowa. What's the status?
We had a great reaction when I was in Iowa. We met with a lot of people from different walks of life, just a tremendous response. And we had said that if I do make a decision to throw my hat in, we'll make it probably in early summer, because in Iowa, the straw poll is in August, and there needs to be a little bit of lead time to get ready for something like that. So if I do decide to jump in, it will be in early summer.
What are the considerations that are running through your mind right now? Obviously, it's a big decision, but are you looking at the other candidates? Do you want to see who gets in? Are there 1, 2, or 3 people that if they get in, maybe you'll say, okay, I'm content that there are good people in the race?
It really isn't about other people or what their decision will be, because I already think there are a lot of great people out there. What I'm looking at is whether or not I think this is the right thing that I need to do with the message that I'm bringing forth, and whether the people that are in Iowa and other states see me as someone that they want to get behind and support.
All right, Steny Hoyer said earlier this week that the odds of a government shutdown now are increasing. There are articles how Democrats are trying to calculate how to best benefit from a government shutdown. There was this conference call with Senator Schumer and reporters. He didn't know he was being recorded and listened to. And I want to play for you what he said, and I want to get your reaction.
Sure.
The main thrust is basically that we want to negotiate and we want to come up with a compromise, but the Tea Party is pulling Boehner too far over to the right, and so far over that there's no more fruitful negotiations. And the subtext of this is the only way we can avoid a shutdown is for Boehner to come up with a reasonable compromise and not just listen to what the Tea Party wants, because the Tea Party wants to stick to H.R. 1 with its draconian extreme. I always use the word extreme. That's what the caucus instructed me to do the other week. Extreme cuts and all these riders. And Boehner's in a box.
All right, so he's instructing his fellow Democratic senators. This is what you say to reporters. Use the word extreme, tie Boehner to the Tea Party. They're not reasonable. They've got to extricate themselves somehow from the Tea Party movement. First of all, I think this is a strategy that we're going to see a lot of in the next few years, so it's very revealing. But what are your thoughts when you hear that?
Well, I think it's clear that Chuck Schumer and the liberals that he's surrounded with are seeing this more as a play and as a political move. That's not how we're seeing this, the conservatives in Congress. This is real. This is people's lives. And Sean, if there's anything that I've seen, especially in this last week, people feel a sense of urgency. They want the country to work again. It's not working. And Chuck Schumer is talking about political advantage for liberals. That's not what conservatives want. We want to cut spending, and we also want to defund Obamacare. So we're trying to figure out a way that we can get to yes. We're trying to work on behalf of the American people and actually get something done that they want us to do. And unfortunately, Chuck Schumer and the liberals are just trying to make political points.
You know, if anything, it's interesting because it seems with the two previous continuing resolutions, and the Republicans did extract, what, I think it was $10 billion in cuts. That you wanted more. And you and Mike Pence are saying, look, we're headed for the showdown. We might as well pick this fight now, because the type of cuts we needed, the Democrats are saying they might agree with $20 billion more in cuts. But the reality is, if you have a $3.7 trillion budget, $1.65 trillion deficit this year, you know, $20 billion is peanuts. So it seems that, if anything, you're trying to get the leadership to be more aggressive and fight this battle now. And maybe there's been some resistance. Am I reading that right?
We've been working on this for some time. Congressman Steve King of Iowa, Louis Gohmert of Texas, we've been adamant about this, that it's time for the conservatives in Congress to change the arc of history. And the way that we do that is we pull back money that was hidden in plain sight in the Obamacare bill. You had it on your show, $105,464 million that no one discussed prior to the vote on the bill. That needs to come back.
All right, so if the Republicans want $61 billion, Democrats are only willing to give $20 billion. Republicans are promising, because I've interviewed Paul Ryan, that their budget is going to deal with entitlements and go back to 2008 spending levels. So my question is, you know, is there any movement on this where they say, wait a minute, we need to take out the pre-funding of Obamacare as well as the $61 billion? Is anyone in the leadership saying that's a good idea?
Well, that is a discussion that's going on here at the Capitol right now, and I think that it's a very fruitful discussion. We heard from Chuck Schumer. They aren't planning on negotiating at all. In other words, they want what they want. They aren't planning on moving off of square one. Why should the conservatives constantly be giving in to the liberals? That happens over and over and over again. And I think that's where a lot of people across the country are saying, we sent you to Washington, D.C. to fight. Now's the time to fight. I'm one of those. Steve King is one of those. Louis Gohmert is one of those. We have a lot of other members here now that agree with that. And that's what we intend to do. We intend to fight.
Congresswoman Bachmann, good to see you. We'll be watching your movements in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, and appreciate your time. Thanks for being with us.
We'll stay in touch. Thanks, Sean.
And coming up, pro-union protests erupt in the state of Ohio in yet another big budget battle. GOP Governor John Kasich is here with all the latest. That's coming up. Plus, remember, former Green Jobs advisor Van Jones. Wait until you hear what he reportedly said just one day after 9/11. The great state of Ohio followed in Wisconsin's footsteps last night. Led by GOP lawmakers, both houses of the Ohio legislature passed a bill aimed at curbing the state's $8 billion budget deficit. Now, they did so, of course, amidst major union protests that disrupted their proceedings with chanting and yelling. Now, this bill will bring down costs by eliminating public sector unions' collective bargaining rights over health care, sick time, and pensions. Now, despite the Democrats' best efforts, Governor John Kasich signed that bill into law just moments ago. And he joins me now. Governor, welcome back to the program. Good to see you.
Always good to be with you, Sean.
Well, $8 billion is a lot of money, and so you stayed true to your word. You didn't back down. You got this thing passed, and you saw a lot of people very unhappy about it.
Well, Sean, I mean, first of all, you know, in this bill that I've just signed, we don't cut anybody's salary. We don't take away their pension. And we don't destroy their health care. What we're saying is that government workers ought to be treated a little bit more like private sector workers. Our private sector workers pay 23% of their health care costs, and the average city worker here in Ohio pays 9%. So it's a matter of balancing. And the other thing is we want to give local governments the ability to manage their costs, Sean. We have some of our communities racing towards bankruptcy because they haven't been able to control their costs. So as we get to a balanced budget and set Ohio into a situation where we can have growth. You know, Ohio's lost more jobs than every other state in America over the last 10 years, except for California and Michigan. So we've got to control our costs, reform our programs, make them more efficient and more effective, and create a growth environment so people will create jobs here in Ohio that will lift everybody, Sean.
All right, let's talk about this, because if you look at the unions and these Democratic groups, they're now pouring a fortune into Wisconsin to recall the Republicans that were being fiscally responsible. In your state of Ohio, this bill that you signed into law will not take effect for 90 days. In the interim, as I understand it, your opponents would need 231,000 signatures. If they get it, they'd be able to put a referendum on a ballot that would show up in November. What are the odds that that's going to happen there?
Well, I think there's probably going to be a drive to do that. I mean, one of the things that we do here is we say to government workers that we want to pay you on the basis of your performance. I mean, it's just exactly the way that they pay you at Fox, or they pay you, you know, down the street at a restaurant, or, you know, any kind of a store. That's what we're trying to do. And I think as voters understand that we're trying to balance things out and make sure that our cities don't get bankrupted and they don't drive jobs out, I think people feel pretty good. But you know what, Sean, I may have a couple things that I may want to put on the ballot, that people want to come out and express themselves. So we'll see what happens.
Well, what would you want on the ballot?
This is the first. Well, I don't know yet, Sean. We're thinking about it. I told the reporters gathered tonight, maybe we'll put merit pay for reporters on the ballot. We'll see. But, Sean, here's the thing. This is only the first step.
Just reporters, not anchors.
Not for anchors. Of course not, Sean. Not for anchors. But here's the thing. This is only the first step in an overall program to eliminate an $8 billion structural deficit. I mean, I come into office, I have the largest deficit in the history of Ohio. But with a reform program on Medicaid and corrections, if we can, in fact, give local governments the tools to control their costs, we can maintain our tax cut and continue to lower costs in the state so we can have more businesses. Sean, Kennedy was right. John Kennedy was right. A rising tide lifts all boats. And in a growth economy, families benefit, the communities benefit. That's what we're striving for.
Well, let me ask you this. It seems that people like yourself and Marco Rubio and Mike Pence and Michelle Bachmann, who was on earlier tonight, and Bob McDonnell and Chris Christie, all the people that stand firm for fiscal responsibility are being rewarded with a lot of support from their constituents. As bad as your $8 billion deficit is, we have a federal $14 trillion deficit. And in Washington today, when John Boehner said that, look, we only have 1/2 of 1/3 of the government, we're going to continue to fight for the largest spending cuts that we can to keep the government open and funded through the balance of the fiscal year, a lot of conservatives got concerned over those comments, because they're wondering if Republicans might be willing to cave on what is, frankly, a fairly minuscule cut of $61 billion.
Well, Sean, look, I've got enough issues to deal with in this state, but what I can tell you is, a couple things. First of all, John Boehner is a real conservative. John Boehner was involved in helping the Republicans to get the majority in 1994. And that led us to a point where we reformed welfare. And as you know, Sean, I was the chairman of the Budget Committee. Yeah. We balanced the budget for the first time since man walked on the moon, cut taxes, and we had a great growth economy. So I know there's always consternation in Washington. Right. The bottom line is control the government spending, provide incentives for job creation, but they have to deal with this $14 trillion deficit.
I talked to Paul Ryan earlier today. I mean, they're looking at $6 to $7 trillion when he announces his budget either next week or the week after. $6 to $7 trillion. And I got to tell you, I think the American people will be clapping. But I also think, even though they're still dealing with tens of billions for this year, I think it's important in principle. Would you agree?
Well, it is, Sean, but I have to tell you that when we bring about change, whether it is in Ohio, New Jersey, Wisconsin, or even Washington, change is difficult for people. But what we have to do is to focus on the larger picture, not play politics on the right, not play politics on the left. And we got to keep our shoulder to the wheel. And look, if the Republicans are able to get $60 billion worth of spending cuts, Sean, at a time when last year they probably got $60 worth of spending cuts. Look, Boehner's doing the best he can. It's good to have the Tea Party pushing him. Yeah. But the bottom line is we got to control this deficit. And, entitlements matter as well. We're taking everything on in Ohio because we have to save our state. That's the attitude that has to prevail.
I think if the Republicans take on everything in Washington, I think they're going to be rewarded. Not only will they do the right thing for the country, but I think politically it will benefit them as well. Governor, congratulations.
It's all about our kids, Sean.
You
put the kids first. You put the families first. That's it.
Thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate it. And coming up, it's our weekly analysis of the thrill up my leg, Obama mania media's left-wing bias. We call it Media Mash. That's coming up. And our Great American Panel straight ahead.